I want to tell you something before this story starts properly. I am not someone who goes looking for things. I'm not the person who checks phones or reads emails or digs through bank statements looking for confirmation of something they already suspect. That's never been who I am. I grew up in a house where trust was treated as the default. You extended it until someone gave you a reason not to, and even then you were slow to withdraw it. I tell you this because I need you to understand that what I found by accident. And I also need you to understand that the accident was one of the most significant moments of my adult life. Not because of what it revealed about the person I'd been with, but because of what it revealed about the person I had trusted most. This story is not really about Marcus, my ex, even though Marcus is where it starts. This story is about my mother, and what I found in her bank statements on a Thursday afternoon while I was helping her sort out a billing dispute with her phone provider. I should tell you about Marcus first, so you understand the weight of what comes later. We were together for 3 years. I was 26 when we met, and he was 31, which felt significant at the time, in the way age gaps always feel significant when you're 26 and someone seems to know more about the world than you do. He didn't hit me. I want to say that clearly, because I think when people hear the word abusive, they picture something that looks a specific way, and what Marcus didn't look like that, not from the outside. It was quieter. It was the kind of control that operates through the emotional infrastructure of a relationship, rather than through physical force. He managed my friendships by making himself unpleasant enough around the people I was close to that seeing them stopped feeling worth the effort of what followed when I came home. He managed my spending by creating enough financial dependency that the idea of leaving had a practical dimension I couldn't easily solve. He told me things about myself that weren't true often enough, and specifically enough that I started to believe them before I realized I was believing them. I left after 3 years, not in one clean moment. It was messier than that, the way these things always are. But I left. I moved out in the February of the year I turned 29, into a flat share with 2 women I barely knew, and I spent the first several months of that year understanding, slowly, who I actually was without him. My mother was supportive through all of it, or she seemed to be. She was the person I called the night I finally made the decision to go. She helped me move. She sat with me on the floor of my new room that first night and told me it was going to be okay. I believed her. My mother has never been comfortable with technology. Not dramatically. She manages fine with the basics, but anything involving logging into accounts, navigating provider websites, disputing charges, that kind of thing makes her anxious in a way that she deals with by calling me. I've been handling her administrative things for years. Phone contracts, utility bills, insurance renewals. It's the kind of small, practical support that becomes so routine it stops feeling like anything. You just do it. So when she called me that Thursday to say her phone bill had a charge she didn't recognize, I drove over, sat down at her kitchen table with her laptop, logged into her provider account with her credentials, and started looking through her billing history. I found the charge within about 3 minutes. A subscription service she'd forgotten about, exactly the kind of thing I expected. I noted it down, started the dispute process, and while I was waiting for the page to load, I scrolled slightly too far down the billing summary and saw a section I hadn't intended to look at. The section was her linked bank account transaction history, the kind of summary some provider accounts show alongside billing when they're connected for direct debit. And there, in the list of outgoing transactions, was a name I recognized. Marcus. Not a payment to a business with his name, a personal transfer, to a bank account in his name, regular, monthly. I scrolled up. Monthly for 3 years. I want to tell you what happened in my body in that moment, because I think it matters. My first response was not anger. It wasn't even shock, exactly. It was something closer to the sensation of a floor dropping out from under you. Not a sudden fall, but a slow, sickening tilt where you understand, before you consciously understand, that everything you are standing on has changed. I sat at my mother's kitchen table and I did not say a word. She was in the kitchen making tea. I could hear the kettle. I looked at the transactions, 12 per year for 3 years, every month, without exception, for the entire length of my relationship with Marcus. Regular amounts, not huge, the kind of money that wouldn't stand out in someone's account as anything dramatic, just consistent, just steady, just there every single month like a standing order someone set up once and then stopped thinking about. For 3 years. For the entire 3 years I was with him. I heard my mother come back into the room. I heard her set the mugs down on the table. I turned the laptop to face her and I said, very quietly, "What is this?" I have replayed this conversation many times since it happened. I want to be accurate about it because I think the details matter. My mother looked at the screen, and here is what I need you to understand about her reaction. She didn't look surprised. She looked caught. Those are different things. Surprise is something that happens to your face before you have any control over it. Caught is what happens when you see something you knew was coming eventually, and you'd been deciding, somewhere quiet in yourself, what you would say if it did. She sat down, and she told me. She had known Marcus before I did. Not well. Through a mutual acquaintance from a social group she'd been part of years before I met him. When I started dating him, she had recognized his name, said nothing. As the relationship progressed and I started sharing, in the way that daughters share things with their mothers, the difficulties of it, the controlling behavior, the financial restrictions, the slow erosion of the person I had been before him, she had, by her account, become worried. Not about me, about him, about whether I would leave and what he would do. So she had approached him, directly, without telling me, and she had made an arrangement. She paid him money every month to stay with me rather than leave me first. I need you to let that sit for a moment, because I needed to let it sit for a very long time before I could even begin to process what it meant. My mother believed, or had convinced herself, that Marcus was the kind of person who might become dangerous if I tried to end the relationship before he was ready for it to end. And her solution to that belief, rather than telling me what she feared, rather than helping me leave safely, rather than involving anyone equipped to actually address that kind of danger, was to pay him to stay. To keep me in the relationship she believed was harmful to me for 3 years, because she was afraid of what he might do if it ended on terms that weren't his. She framed it as protection. She used that word, protection. I sat at her kitchen table with my tea going cold in front of me, and I listened to her explain why she had spent 3 years supplementing my abusive ex-partner's income in exchange for his continued presence in my life. I didn't respond much in that conversation. I think I said a handful of sentences. I picked up my bag, I thanked her for the tea that I hadn't drunk, and I left. I drove home in a state that I can only describe as very quiet and very full at the same time. Over the following days, I started understanding things that I hadn't fully understood before. I understood why Marcus had never seemed particularly worried about money, despite working inconsistently and spending freely. I had assumed, during the relationship, that he was simply more financially comfortable than me, and that I'd never fully had access to the picture of his finances. That was true. I just hadn't known why. I understood why he had never pushed for the relationship to end, even during the periods when it was clearly not functioning for either of us. He had no incentive to. He was being paid monthly to be there. The relationship, for him, had a revenue model I had known nothing about. I understood, and this one took the longest, why my mother had said and done certain things during those 3 years that had puzzled me at the time. Small discouragements when I had talked about leaving, gentle redirections toward patience and understanding him better and giving things more time. I had taken these as the ordinary conservatism of a mother who worried about her daughter's stability. They were not that. I didn't contact Marcus. Whatever he had done it in response to something my mother had initiated, and I found I couldn't locate the kind of anger toward him that would have felt appropriate in a different version of this story. He had taken money he was offered. That was its own thing, but it wasn't the core of what I was dealing with. What I was dealing with was the understanding that someone I had trusted with everything, the person I had called the night I finally decided to leave, who had sat with me on the floor of my new room, who had told me it was going to be okay, had known the entire time what the full picture was, had helped me move out of a situation she had actively maintained for 3 years. I called a therapist. This is the unglamorous part of these kinds of stories that doesn't usually make it into the telling. The part where there is no satisfying legal action or institutional consequence, no settlement letter, no board of directors, no security camera that captures everything. Some things don't resolve through systems. They resolve through time, and the very slow work of understanding what happened to you and why. I did not speak to my mother for 8 months. When I eventually did, it was not because I had forgiven her. I want to be honest about that. It was because at some point, the silence had served its purpose, and continuing it was costing me more than it was costing anything else. We have a relationship now, not the one we had before, something smaller and more careful and more honest, in a strange way, than it was before, because now I know exactly what it is and what it isn't. I have thought about this story many times from many different angles. I have thought about it from the angle of my mother's fear, which was real even if her response to it was deeply, badly wrong. I have thought about it from the angle of 3 years of my life that unfolded inside a set of circumstances I didn't know existed. I have thought about what it means to be protected in a way that causes harm. Here is what I keep coming back to. The most damaging betrayals are rarely the ones that look like betrayal from the outside. The ones that sit inside something that genuinely looks like care, that use the vocabulary of love and protection and concern, those are the ones that take the longest to understand and the longest to name correctly. My mother believed she was protecting me. I believe that she believed that. The belief does not change what happened. The belief does not change the 3 years. The belief does not change the fact that the person I called the night I left was the same person who had been funding the reason I needed to leave. Both of those things are true simultaneously. That's what makes this hard. That's what makes it the kind of story that doesn't have a clean ending and doesn't need one. What I have now is clarity. Not peace, exactly. I think that's still in progress. But clarity about what happened and who knew, and what I'm willing to carry forward and what I'm not. That turns out to be enough. That is karma filed. Real love twisted into something damaging. Real consequences that no one had to manufacture. Real clarity that came too late and on time simultaneously. If this story reached something in you, and I think it might, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell. There is more of this waiting. And if you have ever been protected in a way that hurt you, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. I will see you in next video.